And thanks so much for coming out on this absolutely glorious late afternoon. I mean, to be inside a room on a day like today is truly a commitment, and I appreciate you being here, and I'll try to make it worth your while. I actually brought the book with me. I was teaching it this afternoon. I'm using it in my American Foreign Policy course in Middlebury this spring, and it works in a fantastic way. I think largely because in many ways I wrote this book for my students. Over the years trying to teach about American foreign policy as it really is, as opposed to the way we talk about it in books, I increasingly saw this gap. And I wanted a book like this, and it finally dawned on me after thinking about it for a long time that, gee, why don't I just write that book? And so I did it. It's quite satisfying to actually be teaching it and seeing it connect with students. I wanted to start with a rhetorical question just to get us warmed up. And that rhetorical question is this: why do the firms who recently benefited from government handouts and loans continue to have so much power in the contemporary American political system? That is, why do firms like Goldman Sachs have so much power? Why are they able to get these enormous bonuses after being bailed out by the government? And similarly, why does the status quo in Washington threaten to prevail in everything from health care to financial reform, even to the war in Afghanistan? I've traveled around my book came out in October, I've traveled around the country and posed this rhetorical question to different audiences, and you get really vastly different answers in different places. I even posed that rhetorical question at Goldman Sachs. My husband said, "You can't do that. You can't." I said, oh yes I can. I want to see what they say. And it was pretty interesting to hear their reaction. But what I was surprised about is the extent to which ordinary people around the country have views on this topic. Some see a conspiracy of special interests and Wall Street that effectively drowns out the voice of Main Street. Others point to the revolving door that exists today between the private sector and government, which allows market values and corporate interests to carry the day. What most Americans do not realize, however, and the reason why I wrote this book, is that one big reason that money has been able to capture our politics is because our government today is but a shadow of its former self. Just to give you one statistic, the size of the federal executive branch workforce in 2008 is exactly the same number of employees as it was in 1963. Same number of federal employees in 1963 and 2008, yet the budget in real terms in that same period of time nearly tripled. Now that enormous gap is at least in part filled by contractors. They are doing all sorts of things. Just consider Lockheed Martin. A firm like Lockheed Martin is today doing more than servicing weapons systems. It's also sorts your mail, tallies up your taxes, cuts Social Security checks, counts people for the U.S. Census, runs space flights, and monitors air traffic. That we have become what I call one nation under contract means that there is really no longer any vigorous and disinterested government to turn to for help. That is, government has slowly hollowed itself out. And this has taken place over decades. It's not a partisan issue. But the result is that there's no there when it comes to government. Government is wholly, in many ways, relying on the private sector to do its daily business, and this is particularly so in the foreign policy realm. Again, not partisan. Democrats and Republicans alike embraced outsourcing the work of government to the private sector, both as a perceived cost savings mechanism and as a way of chasing that elusive goal of efficiency. Well, my book focuses on a small slice of this larger puzzle. I have it, so I can even hold it up to show you again. Nice red, white, and blue cover. I kind of like it. It tells the story of how contractors came to dominate, and I shouldn't say contractors, I should also say the private sector defined as both for-profit and not-for-profit entities. All right, but I use contractors kind of just loosely there. But this book tells the story of how contractors came to dominate our foreign policy across the so-called 3 Ds of diplomacy, development, and defense. And its basic nutshell argument is that the core business of foreign policy, what government actually does on a day-to-day basis, has really changed. But our frameworks and our strategies for thinking about it have lagged behind. The result is that outsourcing as presently practiced today is scandalous. But turning the clock back and reasserting top-down government, tempting though it may be for some people, is no solution. It's no solution because outside sourcing done right really can fuel both innovation and efficiency, expanding opportunities for individuals to make a difference. So what I've been arguing is that we don't need insourcing. If you're in Washington, you'll hear a lot of, what I get a lot when I speak in Washington is that they'll see these statistics that I cite and they'll say, oh my God, this is horrible. And so a distinctive reaction to say, this is all wrong, bring it back in-house, insource, insource. And my argument is, hold on a minute, wait. Insourcing in and of itself isn't going to solve the problem. It matters what you insource. So you don't need insourcing, we need what I call smart sourcing. And I'll say a little bit more about what I mean by that. From a foreign policy perspective, turning the clock back is no solution either, because the core threats of the 21st century differ so radically from those of the Cold War. So I would argue that a whole-scale reinvention of what we actually mean by foreign policy is required. You might say that we don't need a new prescription for our glasses. We need a new eye chart. We need to change what it is we see and what it is we think is important.